Igor Adoris, how are you doing?
Fine, thank you. Nice to meet
Yes.
you again.
So you now have the record. You surpassed Unestål on the number of times on this podcast. So Unestål and Igor, you were sharing first place before 3 times. This is the 4th time you are here. So I'm very happy to talk to you again. And for the listeners, if you haven't heard our previous conversations, I can really recommend it. The first episode, I go walking and talking with Igor, and he shares a little bit about his background. And in the second, he shares a little bit about his training methods. And in the third episode, we talked about Corona and dealing with fear and dealing with tough times. So now it's the 4th time, and we're going to talk about samurai mindset. And another thing is that the first time you were on the show, you had written 7 books, and I had 2. So what is the count now? How many have you written now?
I have written 11.
11.
The 10th one should come in November this month, and 11th in February next year.
Okay, so this one is 9th.
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Because I now have 5 of your books. So
good.
First time it was 7-2. Now it's, if you don't count the ones that are coming, but you cannot buy those 2. So now it's 9-5.
That's true.
So I'm catching up slowly but surely.
You are absolutely.
Yeah. So for me, I'm also very interested in this samurai mindset, and it comes from this one as well. Yeah, 1980, James Clavell Shogun became a TV series, and they were shown it 2 times on Swedish television, in 1984 and 1991. And I was thinking when I saw it, but it must have been 1991 because I still remember it. And 84, I was just a young puppy, so I was 6 years old. So 91, I must have been when I saw it. And you saw Shogun as well in your former Yugoslavia.
Yeah, it was also around 84, but I'm a little bit older than you are.
Yeah. So maybe you saw the first time.
I was 9. Yeah. And it made such impression for me. First, it was fun and interesting in the action, but it was almost like fantasy. But then I heard, because it was very popular for a certain period of time, and but when I read about it, I could read that it was based on real people. They call this Toranaga, the Shogun, but it's based on Tokugawa Ieyasu, who is the last of the 3 big unifiers of Japan. The one who was ruling the Tokugawa, or ruling for the last, couple of 100 years in Japan until the Meiji Restoration. And the ninjas and samurais and all that stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember those things as well when the ninjas were coming. So interesting. So after watching this, you became obsessed with karate, and I found a Japanese wife. So we got influenced in different ways.
Yes, exactly.
Had you already started with karate before Shogun, or do you think Shogun inspired you to start with karate?
I think Shogun inspired me to start with karate. I think it was shown 81 or 82 in ex-Yugoslavia. And I wanted to start immediately. But I think I was 8 years old when I started.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I found my Japanese wife much later than after I was Shogun. But yeah, anyway. So have you seen the Shogun lately? Or have you seen it after?
After, yes. It was around 99, I think.
Okay.
I've seen through it again.
Yeah.
And I read the book a couple of times also.
Okay. Yeah, no, when I met my wife about 10 years ago, I tried to watch it again, but we didn't watch the whole series actually, because it's actually quite slow. I don't know, nowadays the TV shows are much faster.
Yeah. It's a different tempo.
Totally different tempo. Yeah. And I haven't read, even though I have the book, I haven't read this one, but I read the sequel, which is 200 years later. When Gaijin it's called, so it's similar. Another guy comes to Japan 200 years later, which is also quite interesting. So for the listeners, if you haven't read James Clavell or seen this, it's quite interesting because he really describes the culture in a really interesting way. So So this inspired you. So samurai mindset. How would you define a samurai mindset?
Well, I decided to write this book like when we talked before. You mentioned this, that generally, and it's true that generally my books are very practically oriented. I usually put a lot of exercises, and the idea behind my approach to mental training that I call Buddha mental training is that mind and body are the two aspects of the same whole. So when then the body is giving immediate feedback about the state of mind, and for that reason, the books I'm writing are, and me as a person also, I always want to experience things on my own. And when it comes to the matters of mind, it doesn't matter if it's philosophy or even metaphysics or religion. It's usually about imagining, thinking, feeling, but the body is usually left out. But what I really learned about Japanese martial arts is that the body is really changing its how would I say, its balance, its level of tension and relaxation, its reaction time, its density, almost the weight distribution. All of these things work differently depending on what kind of mindset or mental attitude you have. And this, because I'm quite skeptical person, this became very interesting to me because I could immediately get concrete feedback through my body from about the different states of mind and how they affect my body. So suddenly the mental training for me became something very concrete, practical, and down to earth. And for this reason, when I write books, generally I always back up what I write with concrete examples, so the person who reads the book can experience it on their own. And I put a lot of, in the lack of better word, I put a lot of pride in it, because it means that I never say, when I teach mental training, I never say something that I cannot back up and that the person I'm teaching cannot experience on their own. So they don't need to trust me, they just need to trust their own experience. And but this book is different because, like you said, after I have written, I don't know, 7-8 books with this practical approach, I have noticed that things started to change a little bit during the last 15 years, because now I have quite a lot of material which is showing my or Buddha practical approach to mental training. But what people generally don't know is the background of these exercises, which was not priority from the beginning, but now it's getting to become, because if you don't have the background why we are doing this, then some people can almost interpret it like a party trick. And I have noticed when I have seminars or workshops that many people who come to those seminars are either those who want to learn for themselves, but for the last couple of years, it has been more and more people who work with similar things, with mental training, NLP, whatever. And I could really feel that they were more interested in writing down my exercises than about practicing them for their own sake. And this is totally wrong approach, because then suddenly it becomes like gathering things for your bag of tricks, instead of deeply investigating something and learning from your own experience, which is the whole point. And that attitude is really the opposite of what I represent. So I felt the need to describe the background of Buddha mental training, which is, in this case, samurai mindset.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, it's like reading lots of books on physical exercise and think your muscles are going to get bigger, and just like adding more and more books and more training methods. But you need to train, and it's the same with what you're teaching.
Yes,
I guess.
exactly. And the reason I call it fundamental training to emphasize the background from practical body-based approach to mental training is that it's so easy to talk. It's so easy to sound smart and to sell seminars to people, and but my approach is based on inspiration that I have had from certain teachers in karate and aikido and judo who really made impression. But these guys, I mean, Taiji Kaze, who was my teacher in karate, he brought karate to Europe in 1960s, and he had like he was old, over 70, and he was overweight big time. He had a piece of grenade in his hip and water in his lungs, and had a heart attack that he recovered from. But when he was teaching, nobody doubted his ability in relaxing and how explosive his techniques were, and his focus and passion and commitment. They were like extremely inspiring until the end of his life. So I guess that this really influenced me, because these people that are my inspiration, they were for real, until the end of their life. It wasn't only about selling and talking. They were living what they were teaching.
And that is quite Japanese as well, to constantly work and getting better. And, So Bushido, you mentioned a little bit about Bushido. Can you share a little bit short about Bushido?
No, I mentioned Budo. Bushido is the, you can say, samurai.
In the book.
In the book, of course. Yeah. Bushido is, actually, it has never been written. It's unwritten oral code, traditional code of samurai's values and rules and behaviors that never were written down, but it was orally transmitted from parents to their children within samurai families. And you could it was a lot about honor, about courage, about loyalty, about compassion, and these qualities were important for a warrior, because it's not only about fighting, because it's very, very thin line between warrior and murderer, and if you have a feudal system, which is quite primitive way of organizing society, and this feudal system was based on the military rule, where the ruling class were warriors, and this meant also practically like 800 years of civil war in Japan. They were always attacking each other and challenging each other and so on, but in and of itself is quite hellish environment to live at for everybody. But they still tried to, I think, both to create some kind of functioning society and also to protect their minds and their souls from becoming deformed and sick. So they needed to balance the violent part of the warrior call with other stuff that like poetry, like calligraphy, like compassion, and so on, to to be able to be a warrior instead of murderer. And I think I added one of those sayings from Japan: a murderer controls and masters his weapons, and the warrior controls and masters himself.
Excellent.
And I say it himself, but I mention in the book the latest archaeological findings prove that more than 30% of samurai warriors who fought and died in different battles were women. The history doesn't really give them the credit for that, but archaeological findings are showing that like 1/3 of all warriors who fought and died were women.
Very interesting. Yeah. No, I asked Aki, my wife, about Bushido, if she was taught this at home or in school or in a formal setting, and she said exactly like you said, that it was part of the upbringing, but not like in a formal way, but that's just how we lived. Even though she grew up in Brazil, most of her school years, or maybe half of her school years, was in a Japanese school in Brazil, and at home it was Japan. And she said, "My father lived like this. This is
it's not
that he didn't give me a book about this, but this was like oral tradition at home." So
exactly,
yeah, that's interesting. So yeah. You mentioned the warrior mastering oneself, and Carl Jung has these archetypes, the king, the lover, the magician, and the warrior. And
yes.
So what do you think is the role of the warrior in modern society?
Well, if you look at archetypes and the Carl Jung's theory of archetypes, we could say that's we need to mention also the term of subconscious and collective subconscious, because Jung is like from the beginning, from the start, the student of Freud, and subconscious is the part of our mind that is governing most of our life, which means subconscious is taking care of our survival physically, that I don't consciously choose that my heart will continue beating, or that my lungs will continue breathing, or that my stomach digests the food. All of this is controlled by subconscious. Subconscious also controls my emotions, because sometimes I consciously don't want to feel certain emotion, but I feel it anyway because it's outside of my conscious control. Sometimes I want to feel some emotions, but they don't come just because I want to, because it's outside of my conscious control. Habits are controlled by subconscious, because when we practice something for a longer period of time, after a while we learn it by heart, not by mind, which means it becomes embodied, and then the body can produce that we have mastered in and of itself. And also one important part of the subconscious is that it's a memory bank, all the things we have learned, and we remember them without the need to revive them all the time consciously. It doesn't matter if it's the name of the book or the title or the name of the content of a poem and so on. But for me, the most important aspect of subconscious is the will to live. We don't consciously need to persuade ourselves to continue living. There is subconscious will, intention to survive and to keep on living, and to have friends and to have partner and to have children for most people and so on. So, and one part of this, and Jung was talking about the subconscious, but collective subconscious, which means that general human subconscious that has certain blueprints that we are born with and that are governing our goals and what we strive for in life, and but also that are common for all humans, no matter what kind of what part of the world they're coming from. But then he talked about as you mentioned, king, magician, lover, and warrior. And warrior archetype or warrior human blueprint has a role of being brave, being honest, and being brave. To evoke warrior archetype is giving you, it's about having self-discipline. It's about having perseverance. It's about being patient. It's about putting your mission before yourself. It's about committing yourself to a certain goal that you are prepared to live for and to die for. Because being a warrior, it's never fighting for your ego's sake. It's finding some purpose that is worth living for and that is worth dying for. And being brave enough and to have this self-discipline and perseverance to keep pursuing this goal that you perceive as worthy and valuable, that you put everything else aside.
This is how I use the warrior archetype myself. Actually, I have a warrior corner in my home. When I feel I get lazy and don't do what I think, I go to my warrior corner and I kind of like get into my personal warrior, and I use it to take action, basically, to persevere, to take the next step. And
yeah, that's good that you say the warrior acts. Warrior acts. Warrior don't just talk. Warrior acts.
I have two things in my warrior corner. This is
Viking.
This is a Viking that I got when I was maybe 10 or 11 years old. I was on a sailing camp, and the last day it was very tough weather. So most of the people, me and my friend, we got silver and bronze for the whole week. But that day was really tough and stormy, and a lot of boats turned over and capsized, basically. So. But me and my friend, we persevered. So at the end, we got this. So this one reminds me that, even if it's stormy, I use this one. And as you know, I'm also into martial arts. I've been training martial arts most of my life, but more Chinese martial arts and also Filipino martial arts. And my instructor in the Filipino martial arts gave me this one. Kill them, suck them in. Yeah, he's a warrior. So this one is also in my warrior corner. So.
Kill them. Subtle. Subtle message.
Yes, subtle message. So I think the modern warrior, like you're saying, these things are attributes that we all need sometimes during those tough times to all those things that you mentioned, I think.
Yeah, to tap into, especially in difficult periods, in difficult times, when we doubt ourselves, when we need all our focus, all our will, all our energy to gather it and to use it in a focused way to overcome. It doesn't matter if you are fighting with loneliness or with the feeling of being worthless or having economical problems or health issues, or your loved one is struggling with health issues. And these things are really difficult to withstand and to be able to come through it. Then the warrior archetype is really good to tap into.
Yeah, I used it a lot last year because last year was a very tough year for me. So
yes.
So that brings me to the next thing. You had this concept 1 to 10, and we talked a little bit about it, I think, in maybe last episode. But this thing that what is a 10 for you and what is a 1 for you?
It's like just one way to try to show what actually what we just said, in what circumstances warrior archetype is the most appropriate. And for me, it is, to explain it like visually, I ask people to imagine a scale from between 1 and 10, where the 1 is like vacation, everything is going well and smooth, and 10 is like worst case scenario, where nothing is going well or smooth. And for me, my clients, I always encourage them to have attitude of mindset of practicing for 10, which means preparing for being able to handle worst case scenario. Because when you can do that, when you have practiced for 10, for the level 10, then if you need to handle level 7, which is quite difficult situation, still not worst case scenario, but quite difficult situation, challenging situation, then you have margins on your side. You have trained for 10, so 7 shouldn't be a problem. But if you in your everyday life only have practiced for handling and managing normal problems, which in our example would be level 5, between 1 and 10, like some kind of normal general level, then problems of level 7 can already be experienced as too hard and too overwhelming.
Yeah. Maybe 10 years ago, or when I started my own company, after 1 year, I had quite tough time. I'll probably put it on a 7 or an 8 on that scale. And that was before I had started with mental training. I started the Unistol course maybe 1 or 2 years after. I had already been interested in these kind of things, like personal development stuff, but I've been reading the surface stuff, like Tony Robbins, right? These kind of like self-help books. And it was really, really tough. But last year was much tougher. It was probably a 9, maybe close to a 10, actually, for me. But thanks to all these things that you were talking about and Unistol were talking about, I felt okay to go through it. So it's interesting. And I remember, I don't remember exactly when it was, but you had some water leak in your apartment. Was it a couple of months ago or something? Or
yeah, it was. Yeah, exactly. It was like almost a year ago.
Yeah, and I sent you something like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That must be really tough." And your reply was like, "Bro, I've been through war. This is nothing." So it's like, that's like you've been through a 10.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And so when you can handle a 10, then the water leak becomes quite simple, you know? So,
yes. Oh, yes, really. It's like, yeah. I forgot that, what I remember when you said that. Yes.
So, aging, getting sick, and death. Last time we spoke, you asked, what are you learning about now? And that was something you were like getting into a little bit, you said. I think maybe not last time, maybe the time before. And you have a little bit about this in Samurai Mindset. I want to share a little bit about this. Like, how do you prepare for these things that will happen to us, to all of us?
Yes. Sickness, old age, and death are inevitable parts of human existence, and also inevitable part of, have always been inevitable part of warrior everyday reality. And this is why I mentioned them in this Samurai Mindset book. And well, if you really, if you think about it, so it means that the body is already doomed for that, because sooner or later it will get sick, and sooner or later, if we are lucky enough, it will get old. Not everybody get to live that long, and it will end. So for me, the thinking about, accepting these things and really looking deep into these realities of life, for me, it's inevitable to start looking for some spiritual aspect of our existence, and not being content with looking at myself only as a material being, because the material part is really very limited and very vulnerable. So to take in these facts of life, for me, has automatic effect of looking into the, not wasting time focusing on what's the meaning of my life, what do I want to achieve or to experience while I'm still here, not taking for granted that if I have health now, what am I doing with my health? Am I, and suddenly it becomes all this stuff that other people talk about, like how you eat, how you sleep, what habits you have, and all of this. But it's not like you do it because you should or some clever person said, but it becomes very basic. It is all about, okay, I cannot take any of these things for granted, and but if I have it now, what's the use of it if I don't do anything with it? I think it was Mark Twain who said, a person who cannot read books, who is an alphabet, and the person who can read but doesn't read, they are on the same level. And I would say it's the same, the person who is healthy and whose body and mind are working well, and the person who is very sick and or ill, and that person's almost, dying. If the person who is healthy is not using his body and mind in any constructive way, then he is on the same level as somebody who is terminally ill.
Yeah. So it's almost like death becomes a tool that you use. Like
it becomes drive. It becomes motivation. Yeah. I don't have time for stupid things.
Yeah. No, and as you may know, my mom passed away last year, so
yes.
There was a lot of interesting thoughts and about these things, of course, for me and for my family. And what's interesting is, as you know, I lived quite an international life, so I have friends all over the world, and in other parts of the world, religion is much bigger than in Sweden. And I think religion, those people that have religion have kind of an acceptance of death in a different way. So I noticed that some like Muslim friends and the Christian friends that they're like, this is part of life, Whereas here in Sweden, in our secular values, that these things, I don't know. But
at the same time, I think I emphasize that in the samurai mindset, that I would make a nuance between religion is not covering the whole spirituality. It is different religions, they are covering different ways, but I think I mentioned in the book, in Samurai Mindset, I mentioned, for example, shamanism, also Taoism, which are not, they are called isms by Western scholars, but actually these were ways of human spirituality before, but when humans were living in small tribes, and every tribe, because they had to struggle with sickness and death and old age and injury and so on, people were naturally living with nature and of nature, and as a part of nature. And I don't mean any romanticizing, just like a fact, because it was necessary for our survival. And all of this, what, for example, Michael Herner, Dr. Michael Herner noticed, and many other anthropologists, is that if you look at Tungusian's tribe in Siberia, and if you compare with, for example, people in Amazonas, or you compare it with Samic traditions in Sweden, you will be very surprised how similar their practices are, even though they never met each other. So spirituality has existed for many thousand years, many 100,000 years longer than those religions that we have in dog and that we have today. And I wouldn't take anything from religions, but it just feels important to say that religions are certain ways of organizing spirituality based on geography and culture and language, but spirituality is much bigger than religions.
Sure.
So why I'm telling this is people in Sweden, they are secular, but doesn't mean that they lack spirituality.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, and, that is true. But that brings me to my next thing, because I was maybe a little bit surprised about that chapter. You were talking about so the third of the Jungian archetype, the magician. You were talking about shamanism and the magic, and I lived some time in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, you have like black magic everywhere, like magic hitam, like these kind of things. So I was a bit surprised to see Igor writing. I didn't know that, because I see you as very like science, rational. So I didn't know this side of you. So. Shamanism, and you want to share a little bit about this?
Yes, like I mentioned, I was always interested in courage, and I was very curious about how you get courage. And I noticed through my own experience as a child that when I started with karate and then I started to compete and so on, I could feel a lot of courage sometimes, but it didn't stay with me always. Sometimes I felt very spirited, but then when I had to fight against somebody who was older, stronger, or more or better in fighting, more skillful, then courage would leave me when I needed it most. Maybe I didn't always show it, but inside I felt it very clearly. And I understood. And also for a certain period of time, I was mixing up courage with anger, because anger is like a drug. When I felt very, very angry, then I felt like anger could chase away fear, because it's such a strong feeling. But the problem was that if I needed to stay angry most of the time, and okay, that takes away fear, but it makes you totally unfunctional in everyday life, because it's like nobody feels good spending time with you, including myself. Nobody felt good spending time with me, including with myself included. So the anger was not like long-term strategy. So this led to, and I always consulted books because generally these subjects and these matters, people in my surroundings, they usually don't reflect on this stuff at all. So but thank God there are libraries, and then I started to read, and I read about samurais' way of how they handle the matters of spirit and mind. And then I read first about Zen and Buddhism, and it's like practical approach to Mahayana Buddhism. And I read about different kinds, Soto and Rinzai and so on. And but I also read later that it was a popular way of describing samurai spirituality through Zen. That it was not it was not represented to that level because samurai existed for like almost 1,000 years in Japan history, and Zen came like 600 years later. So what did they have then? And then I read about Shinto, and Shinto could be, you can see a lot of overlapping with like, because it's about nature and it's about spirits in nature. So to understand it better, I read about shamanism, to understand Shinto better. And I read about Taoism, which is like, Tao is Chinese way, Xian Dao is Shinto in Japanese, like the way of gods. But the gods or kamis, they are not like the gods in that way, but more like different beings that because in Shinto way, in Shinto approach, everything is spirited. Everything has spiritual side. It's just that you need to practice your ability to feel it, to be able to see it. And when I see it, I don't always mean physically. But the information about this stuff has been limited. Japan is far away from Europe, and also I'm an older guy, so now we have internet, but at that time it was only libraries. But then I started to read more about shamanism because it was more material about it. And also in Sweden, I read about Swedish approach or Nordic approach to shamanism. I was also researching Christianity a lot because I can see the aspect of, I know it sounds contradictory, but there is a lot of warrior approach in Christianity, which means if we look at this commitment, but it's more commitment to love, where people were ready to sacrifice their own lives because of their commitment to their faith. And of course, this is not special only for Christians. You can see this in Judaism, you can see this in Islam also. But because I spent most of my time in a Christian country, so I had most access to Christian literature. But the idea is to understand samurais and their belief. Then I had to read about magic and about in Swedish it's called folktro, like people's beliefs, which are not schooled by any religion, but what they learned from their surroundings and so on. And this is what I needed to understand to be able to understand the courage, different ways to feel the courage.
So these metaphysical things, do you have any practice when it comes to this that you use, or was it just interesting to learn about it, or have you? What are your experience with this?
Yeah, I'm not really. I guess that I'm very. I write in the book also that the magical approach to things is about commitment. Like when the healer is putting his or her life on the line to save the person they are trying to heal, and the person, the patient is the thing is that the patient needs to feel that somebody is going all the way with them, and in putting their life and committing themselves to do everything in their power to save them. To do this, you have to be very brave. You cannot do it. You cannot fake this. And I understand in our modern society we have all these drugs and medicines that we can use, and of course I am very grateful for that, and dentist and all of But if you imagine a situation where you don't have this, then the part of your human experience that you have to develop much more is the area of mind, area of commitment, area of faith, because this is what you have. When you don't have things around you that you can use, in of course they had herbs and stuff that they had like profound knowledge of, but it's still not the same as getting the shot of cortisol if you have problems with your shoulder or whatever. So this is what really interests me. But I never really felt, for me, this black magic or whatever. It is about like it has the opposite approach from samurai approach, because samurai approach is putting your worthy goal first, instead of thinking about how you can make use for your own sake of things around you. Instead of that, you have something that's worth living for and that's worth dying for. So it's, for me, I always approach it from the aspect of increasing the courage, and this dark arts or black magic or whatever, it is the opposite. It is about how can I use certain things or knowledge to increase for myself and taking away from others. So it's the opposite from being ready to sacrifice yourself for something that's worth living for.
Okay.
So that's why it's totally uninteresting.
Yeah, okay. For me, that's the other archetype that I work with. So I had a like warrior corner, and then I have a magician corner. So for me, the warrior is out taking action, planting seeds.
Yes.
Whereas the magician is the one that kind of attracts and reaps the rewards. So when my thoughts, actions, and emotions are aligned, and I do my warrior, I'm out doing things, but I do it with the right mindset. The magician is the one that sits back and kind of reaps the rewards and attracts it. Because if I do a lot of actions, but my emotions are not in line, it doesn't, like I've seen it in sales situations, for example. I used to manage salespeople that work on commission. And when they take a lot of actions, but they're worried about commission, they didn't get the rewards because the clients were kind of Like they could kind of sense it.
Yeah. The client felt incongruence.
Exactly.
They are not putting their heart into it because they do the right things, but their heart is not backing it up.
Yeah. So for me, I think there's a place for the magician as well in the archetype sense. Like the warrior is out doing what the magician is.
And this is exactly what samurais were doing. They understood that when they are on a battlefield, they have to be 100% congruent, because going forward, like in a battle, and at the same time looking backwards and hoping that you won't get injured or whatever, is the most certain way to get killed, because your body is going forward, but your mind is looking for the ways how to avoid the whole thing. And then you do it without energy, then you do it without commitment, and then you are like victim of the situation.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned that this book was a little bit like the theory behind your method, but I also see it as inspiration and motivation, because I think inspiration is important. Like in your previous book, Strong on the Inside, there's an app that is attached to it. You can download and listen to Igor, and I went through the whole training method, and when you do, you feel better. But if you buy the book and you don't have the inspiration to do it, and you don't do it, then nothing happens. So I think the role of the book can also act as inspiration to be your warrior and go out and do it. So
it's correct description. Yes, I agree.
Inspiration is important as well. So I want to leave the book a little bit and move on to you have a job, or a part-time job maybe, as a mental coach for Faroe Islands, or what is your title for the football?
Mental coach for national male national football team.
Yeah, so we have listeners all around the world. So Faroe Islands is a small island nation, 53,000 inhabitants, and 14 professional football players in the team, and the rest I think are working somewhere.
Yes. The rest have day jobs.
Yeah. So a couple of years ago, you wrote the book Learning How to Lose. And I think Faroe Islands, I mean, it's a small nation, 53,000 people. It's like a small town in Sweden. And you're sometimes competing against Portugal, France, Spain, the big leagues. So how do you work with a team like this? And when you know that the opponents are like, that they are better?
Yeah, we know they are bigger. And we know that they have more money, and we know that they have more experience playing in big leagues, and like Premier League, like Bundesliga, Superliga in Denmark, and so on. So they have more experience, more money, better payment, more equipment, and that is true. And they have also usually bigger bench. So they are not dependent. If some good players get injured, they have other good players to replace them. It's not like injuries are always important aspect, but the bigger the country, the more good players they have, and they are less affected by that. They have substitutes who are as good.
Of course, yeah.
And the Faroe Islands, the size matters, not only in football. But then we have to look at what we have, and what we have is we have people who have a very special culture, where they've been living on a couple of rocks for like hundreds and hundreds of years. And then to do that, you have to be tough, you have to be a survivor, but also one important aspect of survival is not wasting energy. And this is a theme that I really appreciate in all Nordic cultures, which is about not wasting energy on unnecessary conflicts, being very good in cooperating with each other, not allowing emotions to take over to the extent of getting enemy with people without any particular reason. It's also about showing respect to each other, And all these things, for me, they are like general for Nordic cultures, and I really love Nordic cultures for that Scandinavia. And I could really see it like extra in Faroe Islands.
Interesting.
Also, so one thing we have is we have fantastic unity in our team. It doesn't matter if you have a guy who is invited for the first time to play with national team and practice with other guys, and at the same time you have a guy who has been member of national team for more than 10 years, or a couple of those guys. But it doesn't matter. Everybody is getting equally treated. I have not, for 2 years, I never felt that somebody is pushed aside or treated with less respect or less consideration or less care. It's fantastic unity, and the guys are free with each other. They are open, they joke and everything, but at the same time they take care of each other to the extent that's, I'm sure that most of other teams would be jealous if they knew how safe and open we are with each other. That's one strong thing. Another strong thing is they are extremely brave and hard workers. I never need to put a lot of energy or almost any energy to encourage them to be never out of a fight. They embrace every game, they embrace every fight, and they don't give up until the end of the game. It doesn't matter what the result is. They play uninterruptedly and strive to do the best they can, and I am so proud of them. So if you look at these two qualities, then it's like a Christmas gift to be a mental trainer for that kind of people, because they have the two most important things. They are brave and hard workers on one hand, and they respect each other and are willful to cooperate with each other.
That's nice.
So it's beautiful.
Yeah, excellent. And I think with Nations League, you get to play the other nations that are similar size, and you had
yes.
You won several games, I believe.
We
right?
won. We didn't lose.
You didn't lose at all in the.
No. Since Håkan became the national coach, which was 2 years ago, we didn't lose a game in Nations League, and this is why we are moved to next level. So next year, when we play Nations League again, we play against bigger nations than ourselves.
Interesting.
And we were one of the smallest nations in the smallest group, the Group D, because we had like Latvia, who still has, I think, 2 million people, and we have like 50,000. Even Malta had like 500,000 or 500,000, I think, or something. But we are 50,000. So the other smallest nation, most of them are larger than we are. Andorra, I think, has 100,000. We have half as many people. But now we will play against countries that are much bigger because of the good result that we made in Group D. Now we are moved up to Group C. So now it's tougher opponents.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. And as we're recording this next week, you're getting ready to play two games, right? That was it, Denmark?
Yes, against Denmark and Israel. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, I wish you all the best for that. You almost scored a point against Denmark a couple of weeks ago.
A couple of weeks ago. Also against Scotland, the same story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That must be a fun journey, and also I've seen your nice videos from Faroe Islands on Facebook, so it looks like a really interesting place.
I can tell you it's a great country and fantastic people.
Yeah, excellent. So yeah, we're coming to the end of the show, and I normally ask you, what are you learning now? What is capturing Igor's attention now?
Well, at this moment I'm focused on two things. Now it's getting colder, so I'm striving to take my cold training on another level.
Wim Hofing. What is that? I mean, I've seen you when I do my dips. I do go in and out, but you swim. So what is the next level from that?
Yeah, the next I have a goal actually, and my goal is, because I work in Faroe Islands, and they always have all these islands, and there is usually a stable temperature of water, which is around 6 degrees Celsius.
Okay.
And I intend I didn't decide 100%, but I intend to swim between these islands.
Nice.
I don't think anybody. I think what I heard, one doctor has done it, but then he got hypothermia, and they had to put him in hospital for a long time. But of course, I want to do it without hypothermia. Without the need for medical attention later.
Interesting. That's a nice goal. Then then you're really pushing it.
But it's like 6 years since I started with this, so it's slowly increasing the level of proficiency and the skill.
So did you do your Wim Hof this morning? Your meditation, I know you did this morning, but did you?
I don't do Wim Hof. He is fantastic inspiration for me, but I don't really like his breathing. I use mine because this fully in, let go, fully in, let go. It is creating a feeling of tension inside, and as you probably know when we talked before, relaxation, focus, and breathing are extremely important for me. So I'm experimenting with. I tried his way, and I did it for like first 1 or 2 years, but I usually felt a little bit dizzy and quite uncomfortable after I done it for half an hour or an hour. So I haven't been doing it for the last 3 years.
Actually, I stopped as well after. I interviewed Anders Olsson several times on the show, and he's the Swedish breathing experts. And if you're international, he was the guy that was in Breath by James Nestor. And after I talked to him, I stopped doing Wim Hof. I only do it when I feel that I'm getting a cold. Like to get to like boost the immune system. But otherwise, I also do like longer out. Than,
I like the longer part. It feels better.
But maybe for the cold anyway, interesting. So maybe we talk about that next time. Maybe we can do a live show when you're swimming between the islands and Faroe Islands. That would be amazing. So,
we'll see.
So this episode will be released after your competition with Denmark and Israel, but I wish you all the best, and it was great talking to you as always. And so 5 books, nine done, 5 read, and 2 are coming. So I guess need to speed up. Igor is writing books faster than I can read them. Thank you so much. A pleasure talking to you.
Thank you, Oscar. It's always a pleasure.